I just sat here filming this video on mute. That was literally a 30-minute video, and I have to restart. I've been holding off this video for a long time, and I'm sorry because a lot of people did want to hear my story. But I've also just been withholding this for almost 3 years. I've just been hiding it. I just didn't want it to be a part of me. I just wanted to pretend like it never happened and just resume my life as if I've always been living it this way. I think sharing it will do some good, and I do hope that I can at least help one little girl that is struggling and confused and doesn't feel like she's enough, and a little girl that's scared of puberty, maybe a parent with a daughter like me. I also wanted to share this story for my future daughter, if I were to ever have one. I want her to grow up confident and never struggle with being a woman the way I did. When I share this story, when I share this information, it's for her. So I'm going to divide this video into sections. I'm going to start with the timeline, and then I will do why did I want to be a boy? Why did I detransition? Experience detransitioning, and then remaining effects. So like how my life has been afterwards. In the timeline, I socially transitioned when I was 12. I was closer to 13, but I was 12. And I started binding at that age, and it really stunted my growth. At the time, my chest was sagging and losing elasticity. They did not grow properly. And my older sister and my mom would point this out, that I was very small chested when I shouldn't have been, because the women in my family, nobody has been as small as me. And they would tell me this to not bind because I wouldn't grow. And the medical transition was, I had been prescribed tea and diagnosed at 17, and then about a week after my 18th birthday, I got my first shot. So my appointments and everything were already set up before I was 18. I just want to say that I don't remember things super clearly because this was a long time ago, at least in my mind. You know, it's like trying to remember things from when you're a kid. You don't remember things in great detail. I don't know how detransitioners remember their stories so well and detailed, but a lot of it was a blur to me. So why did I want to be a boy? I can't sit here and give you one answer. I can't sit here and tell you, oh, this is why. A lot of other detransitioners can tell you why. They can, there are stories where they have been essayed as a child. They were a lesbian and they had internalized homophobia. I can't just give you one answer. There were many things. It was a culmination of events. Let me just start off with my personality as a child, who I was as a child. As a child, I was the girliest girl you can imagine. The girliest little girl. Little girls, of course, they play with dolls. They like Frozen. I was beyond girly. I believed in fairy tales. I believed that one day I was going to meet my Prince Charming and I would see him and I'd instantly know he was the one, you know, love at first sight. And we would slowly fall in love and he would take me to his castle and we'd get married and have babies. I loved dresses and cute little outfits, and I was obsessed with dolls. I love dolls. I still have dolls now. I still love dolls. Yes, there are adult doll collectors. I was very happy to find that out. That's just who I was. Also, according to like stories that I've heard about when I was a toddler and 5 years old, I was very self assured and confident and, a little sarcastic. Sure, in everything that I wanted. I was a little stubborn. I basically seemed like a confident little girl. I really did. And then I went to kindergarten. I was instantly outcasted and bullied. I was bullied as a kindergartner. As the years went on, I was still bullied. I was picked on by the teachers. I had social anxiety and OCD, severe OCD. I knew that I had OCD. If somebody else that has suffered with OCD or still does since you were a child, you know how it feels. You know that you don't think the way that everybody else does. You know that there's something wrong with you. You know that other kids don't do rituals for certain thoughts. They don't do repetitive movements for certain thoughts. And on top of that, I had social anxiety. Sometimes I wouldn't even talk. Sometimes I would have like one friend that I would hang out with, but them hanging out with me made them loners. We would have to like stay in a corner or run off somewhere. It was pretty bad when I hit puberty. I hit puberty very young. I was 9 years old. I had just gotten home from visiting the aquarium with one of my friends, and I thought I had an accident. I told my mom, I was like, "Mommy, I had an accident." Because if you don't know, red blood turns brown when it's old. So that's why I thought it was an accident, if you know what I mean. I was scared. I actually thought that I was dying when she told me that it was blood. And she wasn't explaining it to me. She was just saying, "Oh, it's blood." I was like, "What? I'm gonna die." But that's scary. I was so little. And somehow the people at school got wind of this. I don't know if it's because it was obvious physically or because somebody had spread it around as a rumor. That's when the bullying got really bad. I was the tall freak. I was taller than the teachers. I was taller than everybody because I had grown so fast. I had to wear bras, and I remember not wanting to wear them because the kids would notice that I had to wear them. I was growing hair, and the fact that I am Latina, it did not help. It was a lot of hair. My mom had to teach me how to shave. I was just scared. I was scared of puberty. I was scared of the bullying. I was ashamed. And to top it all off, there were rumors that I had been SA'd. Even my family thought that. Which, they were just being protective. But as for the students, why would they spread that around? Why would they say that to me? I was scared of growing up. And bullying was so pointless. It was so pointless because those girls eventually hit puberty and not very far after either. And they grew taller than me. They grew curvier than me. They had a bigger chest than me. In fact, suddenly kids were having sex in closets. There were pregnancy scares. This was elementary, by the way. There were girls trying to show off their cleavage. There were girls stuffing things in their bras, trying to be promiscuous to boys, towards boys, and I was still playing with dolls. I still wanted to play with dolls. Everybody was just, ironically, kids were growing faster than I was mentally. I was not there mentally. I was not ready to be there. Physically, I got my period. Because again, in my head, I thought being with boys meant fairy tales. I thought being with a boy meant falling in love and courting. The things that I had read in books. I'm currently reading this. I thought love was getting married and having kids, a boy bringing me flowers and chocolates. I didn't think that love was sexualizing yourself for boys and trying to earn them. So not only was I outcasted, but I was bullied and beaten down to the point where I was just insecure. I was so insecure that I thought I was ugly for having brown eyes. It was so bad. I was I was insecure about being Latina. I didn't want to be Mexican because I didn't equate that with being pretty as a girl. I was also very, very attracted to white men. I still am, but that went along with that insecurity. I guess because I just thought they were very beautiful. I didn't want a boy to fall in love with me for how I appeared. I didn't want to have to be pretty and sexy for a boy to like me. I just wanted to be loved for who I am. I didn't want to earn it. I didn't want to be in this competition with these fourth graders that had D cups. I just wanted love like it was in the books. It's honestly traumatizing figuring out how boys are, how the world is with sexuality. I did like boys. I love boys, but not in the way the other girls did. The other girls wanted to sleep with them. I sort of just imagined them like PETA from the Hunger Games. So that played a part in wanting to be a boy. I was lonely and I went online and I found fictional stories of males, gay males loving other males. And I saw love stories where the boys were just loved for being boys, but they were loved by boys, not by girls, which was what I was attracted to. I was attracted to boys. I wanted that. I wanted to be loved by a boy, but just for who I was. Just like in these stories, these fictional stories, these fan fictions of two bandmates that I was attracted to, two YouTubers that I was attracted to. These boys didn't have to be in competition with anybody, not physically, nothing. They just fell in love and that was it. I wanted that. It was an escape. They weren't sexualized. That went along with people online, adults, telling me that if I just used male pronouns, I was a boy and I could be a gay boy. I just thought it was a perfect opportunity. So that was one reason why I wanted to be a boy. The second reason was I did not identify with female groups. I didn't identify, I know, ridiculous, with them being jealous of other girls, of being mean to other girls, talking about boys in a sexual manner. They were concerned with appearances while I was concerned with my little hobbies. Didn't really get along with them. I just felt very awkward around a woman for some reason. I still do. So I guess I didn't really identify with sexist stereotypes, and that created internalized misogyny. I thought male friend groups were so cool. Another reason was that I did not like my birth name. I hated my birth name, literally since I can remember. I always hated it. It was mostly because I had shared that name with somebody in my family, and growing up, I didn't feel like an individual. It was thing one and thing two, and I was thing two. That's just how I felt. I just didn't like it. I didn't feel like it was me. I actually hated it so badly. I think overall the reason is because I was insecure. Of course, it was many things and many events, but I think overall it was just insecurity. And that all perfectly came together. People online telling me what it meant to be trans. It just made sense. I hated being a girl. I hated my name. I was uncomfortable with myself. I was insecure. I was uncomfortable with puberty. Every child is uncomfortable with puberty. Everybody has insecurities, especially children and teens. Everybody at some point in their life is uncomfortable with themselves. Who isn't? The online community was just it was so awful. They were telling me how to come out. I was viewing like bottom surgeries when I was 12. I don't even know how I got to those videos or how those videos even like. There were lengthy posts from 25-year-olds on how to lie to health professionals, your parents, tell them that you're suicidal, then they have to give you hormones. Basically how to guilt trip your parents. And it is wrong, but kids don't know any better. They also tell you that whoever doesn't accept you doesn't love you, and they're awful people, even if they're your parents. And it shouldn't matter to you because we're your family. If they abandon you, if they don't accept you, we always will. It's grooming. That's what it is. It's grooming. It put a strain on my relationship with my dad because he didn't want me to transition, and rightfully so. He knew that wasn't me. Many people in my family knew that wasn't me, and I was just insecure. You could see right through me. I am still full of so much regret. I'm angry that this was my life. I'm angry that I couldn't be like the other girls. I never had my quince. I never went to prom. And I remember complaining about these things to my mom too. I was specifically sad when I turned 16. She was like, well, you wanted to be a boy, so. And I remember feeling regret. But I was also like, but I'm an ugly girl. It's too late. Okay, I lied. I'm going to add an extra point of my process. So, me socially transitioning was sort of mostly online, but it wasn't until I got to high school where I saw an opportunity to sort of bring it to real life. Because I didn't have the opportunity prior to that because I went to a Christian middle school. My group of friends knew about it, but I didn't think it was appropriate to ask them to refer to me as the name I had chosen and male pronouns. That high school that I went to, it was all about LGBT stuff. That's all the school was focused on. And that's not to say that I didn't love that school. I had fun. I love my best friend. I thought the teachers were amazing people. At least the ones that I was close to. But that school, I felt encouraged to do it. There were other trans kids at that school that had already started hormones. There was one who was the first trans boy to take testosterone in that town, who had like an article about him and everything. It was kind of like, oh, do you have specific pronouns? Are you trans? We can call you a boy. It was very much encouraged in my mind. I don't want to say it was intentional grooming or in any sort of way malicious. I do believe that these people genuinely believe that they're trying to be loving and accepting. I believe that they believe what they believe because I was there at one point, you know? All the time, oh, when are you going to take testosterone? Have you gone to get testosterone? Did you hear that kid got testosterone? Did you hear that he was the first one to get it? Do you hear how deep his voice is? It was it was just a whole lot of that. Honestly, I 100% believe that if the environment had not been that way, I wouldn't have taken testosterone. It was definitely a gateway, an opportunity. Tell my older sister and my parents, oh, look, this kid is on testosterone. Look at the school's very accepting. The teachers are all about that. I honestly feel like I would have just kept Jaden, which was the trans boy version of me. I would have just kept Jaden as he was, which was just some sort of character that I had online. I didn't think I could ever really bring it to real life, even though I did have short hair and I did bind my chest. And when I did get on testosterone, I was like celebrated. I was praised for it. I remember missing my periods. I miss them so much. I miss my pads. I know. How could you miss your period? They're so terrible. How dare you miss your period? They're horrible and so painful. Well, I did. I missed the pain. I missed the blood. I miss everything gross about it. I missed my cramps. I stopped taking testosterone for about 5 months during the first year, and I didn't care. I feel like my mood had been boosted. You know, I was happy to have my period back, but I couldn't admit that. I felt like I kind of had to go back on testosterone. I think the goal with trying to transition was wanting to be as far away from myself as possible. I didn't want to be me. I thought the more I didn't look like myself, the more changes that I got, then I would love myself. When I look more masculine and unrecognizable, then I would love myself. Until I become a whole different person, then I would love myself. That was my thought process because I hated myself. I mean, I felt regret before it even happened. So I had originally been in therapy for social anxiety and OCD because I struggled, and I told my parents that I was struggling, and my sister. I could not function. I could barely even speak to people. My rituals were unbearable. Thankfully, my OCD is completely managed now. I feel like I don't even have it. I know I still do, but like I just feel normal. So I had gone to therapy for that. And then I told that therapist that I wanted to go on hormones. And she immediately transferred me to an LGBT therapist who was a very old lesbian woman. And the room was full of children's things and everything pride. I don't have a problem with pride imagery, but I only have a problem when transitioning specifically is targeted towards kids. This therapist was awful. Awful. I would talk to her about OCD and anxiety, and she would repeat back to me something that I had not said. I felt like I was talking to a wall. It's like, oh, I really enjoy apples. And she would repeat something like, oh, I understand why you hate oranges. Like, what? What? When did I ever say that? Where did you come to that conclusion? And this was related to like anxiety stuff and OCD stuff. And I remember my mom picking me up and going in the car and just feeling angry because I didn't feel heard and frustrated because I was meant to be improving and getting help, but this lady just didn't understand me. So again, I don't think she meant to do this maliciously. I just think she was trained to transition children. So that went on for a bit, just talking about anxiety. And then I told her that I wanted hormones. And the questioning process was not really a questioning process. I remember it going on for about 1 to 2 days. My memory is very foggy, but I do remember the things that made me frustrated. I told her that I was very girly as a child, and her response was gay boys play with dolls when they're little, too. That shouldn't be your response. To me, that's just not a sign of dysphoria. I'm sorry, that's just not. When she did question, it was kind of like, oh, so do you think you're insecure or do you have gender dysphoria? And I was just kind of like, I think I just have dysphoria. And she was like, okay. It's not questioning. You don't flat out ask, oh, do you think you have, like, with my current therapist, it took her months to come to the conclusion that I have PTSD. And that was through just talking to me. It was her analyzing me, not her asking me, do you think you have depression or PTSD? And me being like, oh, yeah, I have PTSD. Like, so she sort of hit up her buddy at Planned Parenthood. And she was like, oh, I have a friend at Planned Parenthood. I'll message him and try to get you in. I was 17. From what I remember from my hazy memory, it was kind of like, I have this buddy at Planned Parenthood. I know that your dad won't sign a consent form while you're 17. I'll have that appointment ready for you, or I'll tell him about you. You can go on your 18th birthday. It was that simple. I got my appointment and I went about a week after my 18th birthday, which I don't care what anybody says. I was still a child. Who even remembers being 18? I remember being 20. A little bit. I don't remember being 18. I don't. That's still a kid to me. I wasn't even old enough to drink. I didn't know how to drive. I was in a grade below my actual grade because I had skipped a year. Not because I was a bad student. I was a good student. I was an honors student. And going back to me feeling like kids were growing faster than I was and me feeling mentally younger, that still applied. I felt mentally younger. I wasn't the part of the 18-year-olds that were in senior year graduating. I was still a junior. I hadn't even lost my virginity. I was still my parents' baby. I was still a kid. I still thought like a kid. 1 week of being 18 does not mean you're mentally an adult. It's the same thing as Lo Vicky. She said that everybody who bought her OnlyFans as soon as she turned 18 should be in jail. She was still a kid. How is she supposed to think properly at that age? I don't even think you think properly until you're 25. I feel like I'm barely at 23 starting to mature mentally. I feel like my mind is starting to get clearer, as weird as that sounds, and I'm 23. And even then, I still feel like there's a sort of fog in my mind. 18 is a baby. You can't argue with me on that. You can't. I'm sure there are people that felt like they matured faster. My brother had his own apartment at 18, but that was a different generation. That was a different time. He just matured faster. I regret my tattoos from when I was 20. I want them gone. I hate looking at them. Anyways, I had expressed regret as well. I had expressed hesitation before I went on testosterone. I mean, just the fact that I didn't really think I would ever medically transition until I was in high school says it all. But before I did go to my appointment, I was sitting at lunch outside with my friends and I told them that I wanted to carry babies and I wanted to have kids And if I could not do that, I would not go on testosterone. So I was like, oh, I'm going to ask them everything about it. Because that's all I ever wanted to be. I've always wanted my own family. I've always wanted to have kids. Always. I mean, I would always talk about it in high school. Me having kids, me having kids. When I was little and I would play with my dolls, the story would be that they'd fall in love and then they'd have kids and then she's gonna get pregnant. Shove a little shirt up her shirt so it looks like a belly. A princess dress up games online, but like Cinderella pregnant after her happily ever after. Dress up Barbie, but she has a newborn. It was just stuff like that. That was the thing on my mind. And I got there. I was introduced to the doctor who stepped in to introduce himself, and then he left. It was just kind of like, hey, I'm Dr. Whatever. This is the nurse who was a transgender man. I'd say he was probably in his early 30s. He was very aloof, just not very warm or inviting. And he was the one that was going to show me how to take testosterone. But before that, he kind of laid it out on a table. I'll put a picture here. He left me in a room with about 3 or 2 pieces of paper. They were stapled, they were printed. The first 2 pages were kind of an introduction to being transgender. It was like a gray picture of people with pride flags or whatever, and explaining being trans. And then the 2 pages after that did not say anything about fertility. It did not. The only thing that I read was physical changes, like hair growth, clit growth, body fat redistribution. I did not see anything that was health related. I didn't. And I scoured that. I literally looked for anything involving fertility. It was not on that list. It was just like hair loss and weight gain. And oh, you could still get pregnant on tea. There was nothing listed about health complications. And my God, are there health complications? I've seen some horrible ones. Some women had been on testosterone the same amount as me and they're completely infertile. It's an experimental drug. And all you can list on there is physical changes. You can't bother to know how patients are doing, whether they're doing bad or good, or know how to improve that drug or to remove it entirely. He left me in there with that paper. I waited for him to come back and I asked him, will fertility be an issue? I really want to get pregnant one day. That's really important to me. He was very cold. Not in a sort of mean way. It was just kind of like, this is my job. He said I wouldn't worry about that. He told me that I can still get pregnant and I should probably go on birth control. He's like, you can still get pregnant. He said if you ever do get pregnant, just come back and get off testosterone. If you're really paranoid, then you can harvest your eggs, if that's really a concern for you. He did not tell me that I could become infertile. He did not tell me that I could develop issues related to my uterus. He did not tell me that my sex life would essentially... I do still enjoy myself. I have enjoyed my partners, but it's not the same. Honestly, I don't even know what to compare it to anymore because I didn't have sex before I went on testosterone. I had only masturbated. I guess the closest I get is when I don't do it for a very, very long time. But even then, it's just not the same. I hate that I was never able to experience sex when I was healthy, essentially. And I guess I should save this for the remaining effects of testosterone, but since we're on this topic already, my partners have had issues with insertion. I can't wear tampons. I'd say the thing that I really see improvement on is penetration, which feels amazing now. But I once did not feel anything at all. At all. I felt nothing. But over time, that came back, and it does feel great again. But I shouldn't have been able to not feel anything in the first place. And that's the thing I continue to see improvements on, is not so much the closed up bit, but the sensation. That really came back. After that shot, I started feeling like a zombie. I didn't feel happy. It's weird. I felt like I didn't have thoughts in my head. I don't even really remember forming sentences in my mind. I just felt empty mentally. And then I would binge eat. I binge ate because I hated myself. I didn't want to be perceived. I didn't want to be looked at. At that point, it's not that I didn't want to be looked at as a girl, as part of the competition. I just didn't want to be looked at all. I didn't even really want romance at that point. I just hated myself so deeply that I wanted to sort of live in the background like a shadow. And, binge eating made it worse. I was just gaining and gaining. Testosterone added to that. I didn't care if I became the ugliest creature in the world. I didn't care about how to dress or present myself. Again, I was curvy. I had a big... I did. And that went away. I was on testosterone, and they told me to go back, and I think it was 3 weeks. Something like, after 3 weeks, raise your dosage. And 3 weeks after that, raise it again. And then after that, come back for a checkup. I followed their instructions. I did exactly that. And I went back, and they told me that, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I wasn't sure if my testosterone levels were too high or if my testosterone levels were too high to the point where I was producing too much estrogen. They told me that I could have died or that I could have developed cancer if I didn't go in sooner. And they said it to me like they were angry with me, like it was my fault. I just did what they told me to do. I raised my dosage when they told me to. When they told me to. They were like, okay, we're gonna put you on the dosage we started with, which it was like 3 lines on the syringe, if I'm remembering correctly, or was it 4? It was somewhere around there. If I had a syringe, I could show you. But actually, I think I have an image of me taking my tea shot, but I'm not sure if I showed the line in that. I don't know. I'll put it here if I have it. How was that my fault? Why were you angry with me? I should have been angry and scared because that's horrifying. And of course, I didn't tell my parents. It felt wrong, but I didn't tell them that I had almost died and that it was dangerous for me. And they should have had that information. I was still under their roof. I was still under their care. Why were they not allowed to have any of that information? Because I was 18. I was their child. I was not an independent. I was still in high school. I still had a year of high school left. And after that, it was very hard to get an appointment. I would call and they wouldn't answer, or they weren't there, or they were only there on a certain day, but oh, that nurse moved, and then before that it was like, oh, he went on vacation. It was a mess. I could barely get appointments and checkups. They would send me emails on how to change my name and sex legally. I didn't feel cared for. I didn't feel checked up on. I didn't feel like a patient. I just didn't go back. They were still prescribing me testosterone. They still prescribe me testosterone. I still get phone calls. I still get voicemails of, your prescription is ready. I was still getting my prescription without going in for checkups. At one point, I think my psychiatrist moved or something. Whole different story. Also very awful. Male psychiatrist, he filled in for her. He was saying that I was getting testosterone prescriptions. When was your last checkup? And he was almost angry at the medical malpractice. He was mad. He wasn't mad at me. For the first time, a health professional wasn't mad at me. He was mad at what was going on. And you shouldn't be getting prescriptions if you're not even getting appointments for this. Like, you haven't gone in forever. Like, there's no way. Who's prescribing this? And he's like, yeah, you shouldn't be getting that. I don't know how you're still getting a prescription on that. You haven't even seen them. And he's like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you're still getting this prescription? There's no way." And I told him, "Yes. I go pick it up all the time." So yeah, that was my whole process. Gosh, I feel like my tracks are showing. I hope they weren't. My actual hair is like, yeah, this is my actual hair. This is extension.